Welcome to Next Up, Nexters. I'm Mark Halperin. Thank you for joining. I'm the editor-in-chief of the live interactive video platform Two Way, and your guide, as always, to everything that's next up in politics, media, and beyond. Two great guests today. Really super interested to talk to Michael Caputo, a longtime advisor to President Trump, who worked on health policy and has advised people like RFK Jr. and Dr. Oz. Tells us his story. Michael will share what it's like to go both through cancer and cancellation at the same time. It's an incredible story, and spoiler alert, Michael's come through it in great shape, but it is a harrowing story, and he'll share that with us. And then we're going to talk about the Democratic Party's challenges and opportunities with former Arkansas Senator Mark Pryor, who has got some pretty good perspective on how the Democrats can fight back, having lived through the glory days when his dad was a senator from Arkansas. And now his state and so many other red states are so solidly red. So they'll be here in a moment. But first up, my reported monologue. I'm super excited about this one. And I'm going to do my best to not piss you off, but to maybe try to help educate you. And we're going to do it all through the prism of what I call the Gavin Newsom puzzle. Gavin Newsom is on a ride. And all week I've been talking here and on Two Way about how Gavin Newsom is now the front runner for the Democratic nomination. And people's reaction to that has been, I shouldn't say I'm surprised or shocked, but disappointing to me, because so many of you consume political media to get angry or to argue with me when I'm trying to tell you some facts. I think I've got a pretty good perspective on what is important about why Gavin Newsom is doing well. And so I'm going to ask you, come with me here, listen, use this as an opportunity to maybe learn if you think I'm right. I don't mind argument, but why should we care that Gavin Newsom is now, in my view, and the view of Patty Solis-Doyle, who was here with us on the last episode, and so many other folks I know, think Gavin Newsom is now alone in tier one, that he is having easily the best summer of any Democrat who might run for president in 28. So there's three ways to look at this that I think are important. And if you care about America, not just the inside game of politics, but policy and where we are as a country. So first of all, it matters for 2028. Gavin Newsom, governor of California, who's having this incredible moment, he's the front runner now. And so other people who want to join him in the first tier, other people who'd like to be strong candidates, they need to see what he's doing and see if they can check it. Second, it speaks to the question, if you're a Democrat or a Republican, and you're interested in the topic of, will Donald Trump have serious opposition to what he's trying to do as a matter of policy and politics now, in 2025, in the midterms, and then policy between now and the next presidential, we can learn from what Gavin Newsom is doing about how Democrats and others who want to oppose the president can effectively do that. Doesn't mean everything Gavin Newsom is doing is working. In fact, I'm skeptical about what he's doing on redistricting and whether it will work. But again, the prism of Gavin Newsom can tell us some stuff about what works in opposing Donald Trump. And then finally, the issue of leadership. In the age of technology, at a time when how you effectively lead in business, in your community, in politics and government and presidential campaigns, how do you use technology to empower yourself to lead? What are the elements of that? So as you listen to what I'm saying here today, don't hate, don't be about hate. Take it as a learning opportunity. Use it as an opportunity to understand. You could be the biggest Gavin Newsom critic in America. And I'm telling you, you're overstating the extent to which he's a bad guy or a bad governor. I'm not saying he's the best governor of all time. You'll hear me talk about that. But use this as an opportunity not to tweet at me or email me and say, how can you say Gavin Newsom's so great? Or how can you say he's the front runner? Take a breath and listen. And if you're interested in America, use this as an opportunity to understand. I say to people in blue America all the time, if you don't agree with Donald Trump, and you really dislike him, understand that half the country thinks he should be president. They voted for him, and they much prefer him to what blues have on offer. And you should listen. And I'll say to people in red America, try to figure out why Gavin Newsom's doing well. Don't deny he's doing well, because he is. Try to work with me here to understand, why is he doing well? I study it. I'm interested in it as a matter of politics, but it tells you something about America. It tells you something about leadership. So earlier this year, when President Trump was riding high in his first few weeks in the administration and in governance, Steve Elmendorf, who's one of the smartest Democratic strategists I know, and believe me, no fan of Donald Trump, posited a theory that I think was spot on about Donald Trump, and I think it tells us a lot about why Gavin Newsom is doing well now. Steve talked about the 3 A's: action, attention, authenticity. Action. Do a lot of stuff, right? Do stuff. Don't just sit around having the paralysis of analysis. Don't fail to act when your constituents and your stakeholders are demanding action. Do stuff. Donald Trump has led that from the transition through this moment, does a lot of stuff. Second is get attention. We know we live in an attention, a competitive attention situation. People can read about politics. They can watch Netflix. They can play video games. They can do all sorts of things. And so how do you get attention? And that, of course, relates to action. But action's not enough. You need the talent to use social media, television, other devices, other platforms to get attention. And then the third A is authenticity. People respond well to authenticity. And one of the things about Gavin Newsom that's happening right now, even though his critics say this is phony, including his critics in the Trump White House, this is authentic Gavin Newsom. Trust me. So what is he doing? Why has he been on such a powerful run? He had a trip to South Carolina very well. But he has been doing stuff of late on social media, particularly on X, that has everybody talking. He's gotten tons of coverage in the traditional media about it. Democrats, strategists, and other politicians who don't want to run for president are impressed by what he's doing. And the strategy has involved going up against the White House, particularly. There's some other targets, which we'll talk about. And he's taken to using Donald Trump's style on social media, all caps, mocking language, humor, ending his posts often by saying, "Thank you for your attention to this matter," using AI to create images like of him on Mount Rushmore. All these things are meant to get attention and to demonstrate a fighting spirit, because so many Democrats have been frustrated for a decade at Donald Trump's social media posts. And Gavin Newsom is basically saying, I'm mocking Donald Trump, I'm calling him out, and I'm getting the message across. And believe me, the White House has noted. Here's Gavin Newsom in a local TV interview a couple of days ago explaining this new social media strategy. S1, please.
So yes, I've changed. The facts have changed. We need to change. And we need to stand up to this authoritarian. We need to stand up at this moment. It is foundational. Again, it is not about Republican versus Democrat. This guy is an invasive species. He's completely different. I respect the Republican Party. I'm married in a Republican family. I have deep love and respect for people I disagree with. He is something altogether different, and he is unmoored. There is no constraints. So yes, we're going to punch back. And yes, we're going to punch back with the full weight of the 4th largest economy in the world, the size of 21 state populations combined, and with the consent of the people that endow the power to government. We will do the right thing, and we will push back, and we'll succeed this November.
So there's intensity, there's using the power of the state, including going to court on some occasions, but there's also this humor, right? There are these posts that are getting so much attention. So as I said, the White House has noticed. Here's a tweet from Stephen Chung, who's a top communications advisor to President Trump in the White House. Stephen's tweet is one of many reactions that there's been from Trump folks to Gavin Newsom's tweet. And again, it's all caps. It's making little jokes about Donald Trump, nicknames, etc. Stephen Chung tweets, after an assassinated attempt on POTUS just over a year ago, Gavin Newsom, in an absolutely unhinged post, appears to be calling for something even worse. What a vile piece of shit, GFY. So, you know, I don't always assume when people react that they're feeling the heat, but there's a lot of reaction, and that's what Democrats want to see. Part of why Democrats are so enthusiastic about what Gavin Newsom is doing is because he is taking it to the president. He's being aggressive. He's not just sitting back, and that fight is what Democrats want. They don't feel Joe Biden did it enough or Kamala Harris did it enough. So Wednesday night, J.D. Vance on Fox, Laura Ingraham, got asked about Gavin Newsom. Here's how he responded, S2.
Sounding like crazy people. That really is all it is. I mean, this idea that Gavin Newsom is somehow going to mimic Donald Trump's style, I think that ignores the fundamental genius of President Trump's political success, which is that he's authentic. He just is who he is. You've got to be yourself. You've actually got to talk to people honestly about the issues. I don't think it's that complicated. Don't be a crazy person. Be authentic. If the Democrats did that, they'd do a hell of a lot better. But
now, this is a common refrain from the folks at the White House and others, supporters of the president. This isn't real. This is just gimmicky. I'm telling you, it's not true. Here's how Gavin Newsom and his team responded to the vice president, A2, on Twitter to that interview. He said he almost got it. Just like a little jibe. And anyone who's talked to Gavin Newsom, as I have over the years, knows that this mentality, this fight, this effort to stand up, to not let the president and his administration get away with what Democrats want to stop, that's authentic. And part of why some Democrats are reacting favorably to it is they know it's authentic, despite what the Trump folks are saying. Now, as I mentioned, there are other targets. People on Fox News have been saying about Gavin Newsom's new social media persona, well, this is fake. This is not dignified. And this won't work because it's not dignified. If you want to be president, you got to be dignified. Of course, what Gavin Newsom, a lot of Democrats say, talk about dignity, talk about social media. What has Donald Trump been doing for 10 years? Here's Newsom with a bunch of liberal influencers talking about his indignity at being accused of being undignified. This is S3, please.
No, I mean, even poor Kid Rock. These guys... they've become a little precious, haven't they? These folks at Fox. They're like, oh, this is so unbecoming of a governor. Oh. And meanwhile, they sit there reading his tweets every single day. Are they that tonally out of touch? I mean, it's jaw-dropping how precious and concerned New York Post has gotten all of a sudden. How the Wall Street Journal head board is like, oh, no, we can't have this. I mean, what? I hope we're exposing it all. I hope we're exposing it all, and I hope we're entertaining some people.
So talked about entertaining. That's how you get attention in the attention economy. And you heard laughter there. If you're watching on YouTube, you saw 4 liberal influencers. They're enjoying it. On the right, they have the phrase, own the libs. What Gavin Newsom is doing, in effect, is owning the right. And maybe the people on the right genuinely don't feel owned. Maybe the White House and J.D. Vance feel like this is an ineffective joke. But Gavin Newsom is inspiring a lot of people on the left, saying we don't have to sit back and take some of the things that the right, Donald Trump specifically, have done that have been negative. Now, here's another battle he's engaged in. And this 24/7 battle, not letting any slight go by. You won't see that from the governor of Illinois or the governor of Pennsylvania or the governor of Michigan or the governor of Kentucky. They'll engage occasionally. And I don't know how long the team Newsom will keep this up. But if you want attention, you got to be in the fight every day. So Bed Bath & Beyond, the big retail company, who's gone through a bankruptcy, put out a statement saying they can't do business in California anymore because of all the regulation, all the challenges that they say exist in California. So Gavin Newsom saw that press release, and rather than doing what a governor normally would do, probably privately call the CEO and say, you know, we gotta work this out. I want the jobs in our state. Gavin Newsom went on Twitter, A3, and again, it's Gavin Newsom and his team, and they responded to the CEO saying, the chairman saying rather, announced not going to open up any new retail stores in California because of high taxes, high fees, and forced unsustainable wages. Gavin Newsom responded, the company that already went bankrupt and closed every store across the country 2 years ago? Okay. Sarcasm and taking on a big employer. Here is how that same chairman responded to Gavin Newsom's jibe on Fox. This is S4, please.
Well, I think the thing that was really surprising to me is that I tried to articulate in a non-aggressive way exactly why our company wasn't going to reinvest capital in California. And what I found out this afternoon is that Governor Newsom has enough time to respond to a tweet as opposed to a private DM or having somebody reach out to remind everybody in America that in 2023, before we bought the intellectual property, that the company went out of business.
So here's the CEO saying, yeah, why isn't he doing the standard thing, right? And here's what I think Republicans are missing as they critique Newsom's performance. He's not doing the standard thing. That is what the mood of the electorate. They don't want business as usual. And liberals who don't like Donald Trump, they want somebody trying something new because Donald Trump continues to win. He's won 2 out of 3 presidential races. Yes, he's lost Congress at times, and he's not won every midterm election. But he's winning right now. The fight against universities, the fight against law firms, the fight against liberal corporate America, the fight against the Kennedy Center, the fight against the federal bureaucracy. What people want is not business as usual. So when Donald Trump, the last 10 years, has done stuff that's not conventional and taken on things like companies, his supporters have said, good, do something different. That's exactly what Gavin Newsom's doing on his Twitter feed. It's exactly what he's doing vis-a-vis Bed Bath & Beyond, and it's striking a chord with some liberals. Now, when I say Gavin Newsom's alone in tier 1, I hear a lot of people on the right say that's ridiculous. That's not right. He's such a horrible governor, a horrible person, etc. You may recall, if you're a longtime Nexter, that episode 2 of this program featured in my interview with Gavin Newsom. And in that conversation, I presented to him what I called the 4 myths, the 4 things about Gavin Newsom that his detractors, mostly on the right, but some in the center and left, think about Gavin Newsom that I think are wrong. Now, this will make many of you angry, but I'm telling you, I've known Gavin Newsom. I've covered him. I've studied his career. And these are myths, okay? So stay with me because this guy could be the Democratic nominee for president. And if you're on the right, you want to know, what's he like? What's the truth? Because the voters are going to seek out the truth, not the spin. And if you're on the left, you also should know the truth about the guy who you're thinking about making your candidate. Myth number 1, Gavin Newsom is super liberal. He's liberal on everything. Now, he'll tell you on abortion rights, on gay rights, he's as liberal as they come. But it's a myth to say that Gavin Newsom is liberal on everything. Take, for example, his interview with Charlie Kirk, where he made some comments about trans athletes in sports that rubbed people on the left and in the wrong way, and some people on the right thought were phony. On some cultural issues, on crime, he's not an ultra-liberal. And on economics, he will tell you his record is nuanced. I'm not saying he's the most conservative, but here's Gavin Newsom talking about the notion that he's extremely liberal on everything. This is S5, please.
I'm a pragmatist. I'm a small business owner. I've created 22 small businesses, taking pen to paper, close to 1,000 people that I've had the privilege of employing in the state. I've had an entrepreneurial mindset. I embrace innovation and free enterprise. And so this notion that I'm a wild-haired liberal is just nonsense. That said, on progressive social issues, I stand tall and firm in terms of my advocacy.
Again, don't misunderstand what I'm saying. Can you look at Gavin Newsom's record as governor of California and find lots of liberal positions, liberal bills he signed into law, liberal statements he's made? Yes, you can. But that doesn't make him the most liberal person in the Democratic Party. It's a liberal party, and it's moved far to the left. He's run businesses. He's started businesses. He's signed the front of paychecks. That doesn't make him, Donald Trump. It doesn't make him Tom Cotton. But it does mean that he's not a doctrinaire liberal on economics and some social issues. And I'm telling you, don't flood me with messages saying he's so liberal, he's crazy liberal, the state's so liberal, that's the reason Bed Bath & Beyond closed. He's liberal, but compared to other Democrats who might run for president on plenty of issues, he's more moderate. All right, second myth that I talked to Gavin Newsom about, all these are still germane, is that he's a pretty boy, know nothing, that he's not a serious person, that he doesn't know about policy. Go read his book about the digital economy, the digital society, which came out well ahead of the curve. Do I think he's handsome? I do. Not my type, but I do. Do I think that he is the smartest person I've ever met? No. But I met a lot of smart people. But it is a myth to say that he's a pretty boy who's never accomplished anything, who's not serious about policy. Here's Gavin Newsom on myth 2.
It's been a point of pride, what we've done in California as it relates to advancing public policy through a lens of good public policy mindset, meaning our commitment to the best politics is a better idea, and our commitment to be pragmatic, not ideological in terms of pursuit of public policy. But it's absolutely untrue that I wake up with sort of a Geiger or some sort of political lens to every decision I make. It's just total BS.
Yeah, again, part of this myth he referenced there is that he's just a calculating politician, that he's just a pretty boy idiot who's calculating. He's all about ambition. Okay, now again, please don't send me emails and texts and go on Twitter and say, Mark Halperin says Gavin Newsom is the most substantive, serious person and he's a genius and blah, blah, blah. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's a myth to say that he's a pretty boy dunderhead who's all ambition, doesn't care about public policy. Go have a public policy conversation with him about homelessness or crime. He can do it. Okay. Next myth. California has completely failed. Now, there's lots of signs of that. There's homelessness. There are drug problems. There's crime. It's also a state where, on his watch, two-term governor, they've had some success. Now you can say, well, it's all having to do with the private sector. Well, governors get some of the credit when things go well. Has he done things in terms of public policy that business would say have hurt business? Yes, yes, yes. Don't overreact to this myth. What I'm saying is, if he runs for president to win the Democratic nomination, and then separate question, can he win a general election? There are successful things that have happened in California on his watch. Not 100%. He's not the most successful governor of all time. A lot of people in California, including Democrats, don't think he's been that successful. But don't fall into the trap of saying that California is 100% failed. Fifth largest economy in the world. It's grown on his watch. He had something to do with it. S8.
Well, I don't know. I mean, if I'm representing a failed state, it's the fourth largest economy in the world. We dominate in every critical category. We continue to grow. We continue to outperform. We're a wealth-making machine. We're a state, by the way. I'm so sick and tired of the mythology that we're a high-tax state. It's just a lie. It's made up. 16 states tax their low-wage earners more than the state of California.
Okay, fourth largest economy, he says. I think it toggles back and forth, but he's probably right. It's fourth now. Again, if he runs for president in the context of the Democratic process for the party, and then if he's the nominee in the general, there'll be a robust debate about how California did. But it doesn't serve the debate, and it's inaccurate to say on his watch, California is just a failure on everything. There are lots of failures, and believe me, you'll hear about them if he runs. You hear about them now. But it is wrong to say that on his watch, the state has been destroyed, because there's still a lot going on in California. Silicon Valley, Hollywood, fourth largest economy in the world. There's a lot going on there. He's had something to do with it. The last myth is the one that I think is the most misunderstood. I'm the only one who thinks Gavin Newsom might not run for president. Everybody else says, of course, he's running. And to be clear, he's talking to people now about a campaign. He's hiring people or asking people if they'd be available. He's building a very strong team if he decides to run. And I think he may enter the race and then decide to get out. But there are lots of reasons why I'm skeptical that he'll run, having to do with my reporting, private reporting with people close to him who've talked about his ambivalence, his family's ambivalence. But listen to what he said to me on this myth that he is 100% running about his daughter. This is S7, please.
Oh, my gosh. I had my oldest daughter last night. She's 15, almost in tears, because she can't take it anymore, because she's got someone now with her because of the world we're living in. Ted was talking about that on your show a couple days ago. Things have radically changed. She said, Dad, I can't take it anymore. When are you done with this? Give us our life back. No, it's very intense and emotional.
People say, if he decides to run, he's not going to give a crap about what his daughter thinks. I'm telling you, he's a caring dad. Any family runs for president. You think her life has been disrupted by being with a small security detail that the daughter of the governor of California gets? If he runs for president, her access to privacy, her access to anonymity, her access to go to the mall, it's over. It's over for as long as he's president. And it's deeply changed for the rest of her life. So that one story really resonant for me. I know you all, many of you all listening, of course he's running. Why is he doing all the things he's doing now? He's keeping his options open. I may be wrong. My gap may be wrong. My sources may be wrong. Maybe he'll run. But I'm telling you, there's reasons to believe, he said it right there, that he may not run. And there are plenty of people who do all sorts of things to prepare to run for president. They hire teams. They start organizations. They travel to the early voting states, and then they don't run. So I'll say myth number 4, don't be 100% certain he's going to run. Okay? Now, this stuff he's doing currently, fighting Trump on the fires, aftermath, fighting Trump on redistricting in particular, doing all this stuff on social media. Elites love it. The press loves it. He's gotten stories in every publication in America about this strategy. I'm talking about it now. You get to see quotes from people, prominent strategists saying this is great, academics, liberal academics saying this is why this is so great. I don't know that we know the voters think it's so great. Here's a poll that Politico did in the midst of all of this. It's happening every day, so maybe opinion will change. But here's a poll from Politico. They asked Democrats and Democratic-leaning independents in California, who do you like for your nominee in 2028? Now, Newsom is first. 25%. This is amongst California voters. Kamala Harris 6 points behind him. And then they asked influencers, and the influencers said, yeah, 14%. It's California voters. Now you say, well, he's first. He's only up by over Kamala Harris by 6 points. And we all know what happened to her public image. And only a quarter of them said him. And then you see Buttigieg and AOC and others below there. I don't think this poll is great for him. I think this poll confirms my suspicion that maybe the voters aren't as into this social media stuff and this Trump mocking stuff as the elites are. Getting the support from elites is important. But this poll to me says this is not some revolutionary thing. You can be the front runner at this stage without having voters before you, because now it's about the donors and the strategists, etc. So I'm not sure he's going to run, and I'm not sure that by every measure he'll stay the front runner. And of course, in the end, the voters are what matter. There's other things I want you to think about when you think about Gavin Newsom that aren't being talked about that would downgrade his possibilities. I'll say again, I've been talking about it all week. He's alone in the first tier. But let me tell you some things that aren't being talked about, that if you want to think about Gavin Newsom's prospects to be the Democratic nominee, to win a general election, you should think about it. First of all, it's very hard to run for president from California. Now, in the digital age, you can communicate with the whole country digitally, and he's as good at that as anybody. On social media, he hosts these live video calls, like video town halls. But if he wants to start campaigning in New Hampshire and South Carolina, that is a long haul. Time difference, distance, it's hard. So that's one thing you got to consider. I've watched other Californians run for president. It ain't easy. Now, he'll be out of office for a part of it, but unless he's going to move his family, that's a challenge. Second, I don't know if I call this a dirty little secret, a secret, or just dirty, but other politicians in the party don't like him much. He has not courted people, even in his own state, but around the country, nearly as much. People like Wes Moore, governor of Maryland, Governor Shapiro, Pennsylvania, they're more popular with the other governors. And that matters. It matters for fundraising. It matters because the other governors may settle on one candidate who they want to be the consensus choice, the way the Republicans settled on George W. Bush in 2000. So watch to see if Gavin Newsom, as he has success, watch to see if other folks in the party rally to him, other politicians, or they decide they need to stop him because they don't like him. So that's another factor. Another factor, dealing with scrutiny. Okay, Patty Solis Doyle and I talked about this last episode. Everybody who runs for president has to get braced for a higher level of scrutiny. Even the governor of California, one of the biggest and most visible jobs in American politics, he's going to get scrutiny. I've already seen it on social media today. And some of the stories are no secret, but they'll be a surprise to most Democratic voters in places like South Carolina about his conduct when he was running for office, when he was in office. I saw a tweet today, a news story reminding people about his personal life when he was the mayor of San Francisco. That's the stuff we know about that's going to be recycled. And I'm not going to talk about the other stuff that may come up today. And I'm sure there's stuff I don't even know about. I had no idea about some things about George Bush and Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, when they ran, even though they'd been in public office. So watch that and watch to see how he handles that, and watch to see if he's confronted with some of that stuff early on, whether he pulls back from running. Everybody needs to calm down, okay? This guy may run. Everybody but me thinks he'll definitely run. This guy will be scrutinized. This guy has a record that's mixed. But calm down. Calm down about Gavin Newsom. Don't say he's too failed, he's too liberal, he's too pretty, he's too ambitious to win. He might not. But don't prejudge it. Gavin Newsom is not as great as his supporters say he is, and he's not as bad as a lot of folks think he is. He's a guy who's on a great roll with this new social media strategy. He's a guy who's letting his inner, authentic self show more in public, and he's a guy who's letting it rip in an authentic way against Donald Trump. And right now, the reason he's alone in the first tier is there's one standard in the Democratic Party that at least the elites are attracted to. Are you ready to fight every day in every way, in the courts, on social media, with the press, with the voters? Are you willing to fight every day to try to contain Donald Trump? And Gavin Newsom is doing it better and more effectively. The 3 A's, he's getting attention, he's being active, and he's showing his authentic self. Trust me, this is his authentic self. Gavin Newsom showed courage coming out well before Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama, Hillary, and Bill Clinton did on gay marriage. Go study that. Study that example. If you think he's a soft, feckless, pretty boy, go study his career. This is a guy who understands the game of politics, understands media, understands digital. I'm not predicting he'll win. And I'm not predicting he'll run. But there's a reason why I have him in the top tier by himself right now. All right. Tell me what you think about today's report. You can send me an email at nextuphalpern@gmail.com. Find the show anytime on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Our handle, Next Up Halpern. And don't forget, always watch the show if you'd like to see everything on YouTube. We're at youtube.com/nextuphalpern. Grateful to you for being part of it. Love to hear from you always. Next up here, former Arkansas Senator, Democrat Mark Pryor joins me. All right, think about this. What if you could delay your next 2 mortgage payments? That's right. Imagine putting those 2 payments right back in your pocket, finally getting a little breathing room. It's possible when you call the folks at American Financing today. If you're feeling stretched by those everyday expenses, the cost of groceries, of gas, all the bills piling up around the house, you're not alone. Most Americans now putting these expenses on credit cards. And that means there doesn't seem to be any way out. American Financing, though, can show you how you use your home's equity to pay off that debt. So you need to call American Financing today before you get to that point where you can't make those payments. Their salary-based mortgage consultants are helping homeowners just like you to restructure their loans, consolidate their debt, and does it all without any upfront fees. Their customers, get this, they're saving an average of $800 per month. That's the equivalent of a $10,000 a year raise. It's fast, it's simple, and it could save your budget this summer and into the fall. So call now before it is too late. Dial 866-886-2026. Again, that's 866-886-2026. Or you can go on the web and visit them at americanfinancing.net/next. All right, next up, Mark Pryor, former senator from Arkansas, served from 2003 to 2015. He's a Democrat. Before he was a senator, he was Attorney General of Arkansas, and he currently works with a law firm splitting his time between Washington and New York. Brownstein, Hyatt, Faber, Schreck. Should have Pryor in there. Before he was any of those things, he crossed my path. We both grew up in the Washington, D.C. area to dads who were very accomplished, and Senator Pryor's dad was a politician from Arkansas with a lot of big jobs. But before I covered Bill Clinton, before I covered Barack Obama, before I covered all the great speechifiers, I went to a high school assembly, and there was a guy there who was running student was senior in the student government. And he, as Bill Clinton said, talked the owls down from the trees. If it was not the best speech any high school student has ever given to his classmates and other members of the school, I don't know what was. And it left quite an impression on me. So it was no surprise when I learned that that gentleman was go on to be a United States Senator. Joining me now, the gentleman from Arkansas, Senator Pryor. Senator, welcome in.
Well, thank you. It's nice. We did. We went to Walt Whitman High School. I graduated class of 81. I think you were 83.
83. So as a sophomore in high school, I saw you give a great speech. I don't know. How'd you win that job? How'd you become student council president?
That's a good question, because I actually didn't move to DC until midway through my 10th grade year. Yeah. I did not know a soul in the school, and a year later, I'm running for student body president. I win somehow, but no, that's nice you remember that. But that was a great school. We had a great experience there, and I know you played a lot of basketball and all that, and I played a little bit of football, but I really did focus on student government. It was a good experience.
Yeah. It's funny, when I first met Bill Clinton and first started spending time in Arkansas, I spent a lot of time in Little Rock when I was covering the Clinton campaign in 1991, 1992. I was not fully familiar with Arkansas political culture, but I became so. And your dad and Dale Bumpers were the two senators from Arkansas. And both your dad and Senator Bumpers were incredible politicians. And Bill Clinton, who is, I think, by consensus, the greatest of all time, at least in the modern era, he had so much respect for both your dad and Senator Bumpers. And would just say, like, Mark, you have to understand, these guys they're really knowledgeable about policy. They're great politicians. They're Democrats who've gotten elected and reelected in a competitive state. And it just struck me so much that Bill Clinton, of all people, had so much respect for both Senator Bumpers and for your dad.
Well, we were spoiled in Arkansas because for a small state like ours, we had really talented people that were in office. And again, Bill Clinton, Dale Bumpers, my father, David Pryor, and there were others too. There were a lot of really good people. I was in the legislature for some of that time. And when you were in Little Rock, I was in the legislature, and it was fantastic. It was such a great learning experience for me to really learn how to get things done. And one thing I loved about those years when I was in the state legislature and even attorney general in the state, it wasn't partisan at all. We were heavily Democratic, but we had our fights, within everything. And the party label never really came up. We really talked about substance and policy, and we did a lot of great things for the state of Arkansas. And of course, my dad and Bill Clinton and Dale Bumpers were all part of that. So anyway, what a great legacy. And I wish our politics could get back to that. I wish we could decrease the volume and really lower the priority for the party and really focus more on policy and what's best and what's right.
I don't want to insult Tom Cotton or Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the other folks there now, but really to have had two senators of the stature of your dad, David Pryor, and Dale Bumpers and Bill Clinton, and then have to elect the first Arkansan president, it was kind of an incredible thing that I think easy to take for granted at the time. But they were not just incredibly effective public servants, but as you said, they worked across the aisle. Today, Arkansas, like the rest of the South, is dominated by Republicans. Very few. I don't know when they'll next be a statewide elected in Arkansas who's a Democrat, but I don't think it's happening anytime soon.
But we are seeing some really quality candidates emerge on the Democratic side. They haven't been winning yet, but even on the state legislative races and all that, the Democrats are getting much, much closer to winning a lot of these races. So it's going to be interesting. We'll see what happens over the next 2 or 3 years. But I'll tell you this, one last thing on Bill Clinton and my dad and Dale Bumpers is that David Pryor and Dale Bumpers were such good politicians that Bill Clinton would say he couldn't beat either of them for the Senate.
Exactly.
And, you got that much talent where you've got Bill Clinton who's sitting there as governor and can't win a Senate race against those two, either one of those two, maybe. I mean, he never ran. We would have seen what had happened. But anyway, really, really great memories. Thank you for mentioning that, because Arkansas does have a great legacy on that.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's easy to say good old days and to glorify and romanticize. But I'm telling you, it's like saying, Bill Russell wouldn't be a great NBA player today. No, actually he would. And those three, they were just titans. They could have been with the founding fathers. I say that truly. I'm not being hyperbolic. Those three guys could have been with the founding fathers. They could play politics today. They were just so shrewd, but also, again, they were all in politics for the right reason. And if you're listening to this, watching this, and you're not familiar with David Pryor and Senator Bumpers and obviously everybody knows that President Clinton, go read up on them. They're just extraordinary. They were extraordinary. And as you said, Bill Clinton said, I couldn't beat those guys in Arkansas.
Yeah. And last thing really is my father died about a year ago. And when Harry Reid gave his farewell address, as a senator, he said he'd often been asked about who the best legislator was that he served with. And, he served with a lot of giants in the Senate. But he said David Pryor of Arkansas was the best legislator he ever served with. And that what a great compliment. And I mentioned that at his eulogy, at his funeral, because really my dad was extraordinary. And he was in addition to everything else, he's just a great person. He really was. I know I'm biased because he's my father.
No, I obviously didn't know him all that well compared to you, of course. But I spent time with him, time with Senator Bumpers, and they just radiated dignity and humor and seriousness of purpose. And I'm not saying there's no senators like that today, but they're titans. Both those guys, your dad and Senator Bumpers.
Thank you for saying that.
And in my experience, you'll tell me if I'm wrong. In my experience, sometimes when a state has two powerful senators, they don't get along. Your dad seemed to get along with Senator Bumpers pretty well.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. And because you've been so nice about my dad, I'll make sure my mother listens to the podcast later today.
All right. Good deal. And the kids too. I want to talk about the party. And I want to start with the positive, and then we'll get to some of the challenges. Because again, you in your own right, great politician, and you beat a Republican to win your seat, and then you lost a Republican to go back to the private sector. And you're familiar with the challenges the party has, not just in the South but nationally. So there's a guy in Maine who's running for the Democratic nomination to go against Susan Collins. His name's Graham Plattner. Nobody had heard of him 2 days ago. He put out a 2-minute announcement video, and it's got everybody in the party talking. It's all over social media. Just this one video has really grabbed people's attention. So I want to show you a little bit of this 2-minute video that this guy Graham Plattner has put out, and then let's talk about why you think it's striking such a chord.
Great.
My name is Graham Plattner, and I'm running for U.S. Senate in Maine to defeat Susan Collins. A decade of military service going overseas, farming oysters to feed my community, diving to lend a hand to other fishermen, trying to start a family. But everywhere I've gone, it seems like the fabric of what holds us together is being ripped apart by billionaires and corrupt politicians, profiting off of destroying our environment, driving our families into poverty, and crushing the middle class.
All right. So for those of you listening on the podcast version, that guy's not wearing a suit. He's wearing stained hoodies and T-shirts. He's chopping wood. He's got facial hair. Senator, why is this guy striking such a chord just with that one video?
Well, that's a very powerful video. He's touching on so many themes, so many issues that people care about today. And what he says resonates with people. People have that feeling, and it's not always articulated, but they have that feeling that really our democracy has lost something here. And it is controlled by billionaires, and it is controlled by others like that. That means that ordinary people really don't have much of a voice anymore. And people feel like that our politicians, our elected officials are not listening to us. So I do think he's tapping into something that is really strong there. And then the question is will he be able to convince Mainers that he's right about Susan Collins, that she's not representing Maine very well, that she's part of the problem and all those kind of things. I'll say this about Susan. I like her personally. She and I worked together very, very closely when we were in the Senate, and she's very popular back home, or has been. I don't know what the Trump factor is there. I know that Kamala Harris carried the state last time, 52, 40 something. Yeah. So we'll have to see how successful he is in that. But she's been able to hang on to that seat, and in some bad election cycles, she's been able to always come back. So we'll see. I haven't seen any polls, but that certainly does have Democrats energized right now.
Yeah. You think people in your party will start sending that guy money?
I would think so. I did notice that she's raising money out on the West Coast.
Yeah,
and that's a little bit of a headline because, Republicans don't always do that, or at least the perception is.
Let's talk about that.
The truth is they do, but she's made the headline on doing that.
Well, I apologize. Let's talk about that. Put up B3. Not only is she raising money on the West Coast, she's raising money from Democrats on the West Coast. The New York Times broke the story this week. Some of Hollywood's Susan Collins to get Hollywood treatment at fundraiser featuring Democrats. Some of Hollywood's most prominent Democrats are set to hold a fundraiser next month for her. Amongst those, the Times says it's doing a Sherry Lansing and Casey Wasserman, who again are big supporters of Democrats. I know either of them supported you when you ran.
Yes, Casey did for sure.
Yeah. I mean, he was a big supporter of Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, big supporter of Joe Biden. So what does that say about? To some extent, it says something about Susan Collins, because what you said, you like her. Lots of Democrats like her, but Democrats, if they want to take back the Senate, have to win that seat. So what some Democrats will say is, this is another example of our party playing by namby-pamby rules, helping Susan Collins get reelected, when if we don't want John Thune to be majority leader, we got to stop helping Susan Collins. We got to help this lobsterman. So what do you say about how the party grapples with that challenge?
say that. They'll be critical of donors who decide to support a Republican. And I think that actually, candidly, is a little bit unfortunate. We need to kind of go back to the middle in this country and look at people and make those independent evaluations. But I would say on her, what I don't know is, does she have any previous relationships with those people? It's possible she's been in office for a long time, but I also wonder, and I don't know this, but I also wonder if Israel isn't a factor, because she's been fairly strong in her support of Israel. And my understanding is that she's already criticized her opponent for not being as supportive as she is. So there could be an Israel factor in this. I'm not quite sure.
If you were still a Democratic senator and you were at those weekly lunches that senators have by party, and Senator Schumer said, Senator Pryor, should I call Casey Wasserman and Sherry Lansing and tell them don't be helping the Republicans keep the majority? Would you say the party should try to enforce that on these two stalwart donors of the party?
Yeah, I would say no. I don't. Again, I always appreciated all the Republican support I received, and I received a lot of it. I was always very moderate. Susan's moderate. Yeah. At least by today's standards, she's not really on the Trump train, so to speak. She's going to be in hot water with the party's base from time to time on certain issues. And for example, I think she's pro-choice. But I'd say no. Let's get out there and let's support candidates, and let's get good Democrats to run. And apparently, they did get a good Democrat to run there. Let's see what happens in Maine, and let Mainers decide who they want in the Senate.
Yeah, well, that's a very thoughtful position, but I can tell you,
well, I can tell you,
there's some Democrats who are furious about it. All right, voter registration. I've talked about this on the program before. Your party is tricked by the media, which is so loyal to Democrats, but into ignoring festering problems. And finally, after many years of clear data showing every state voter registrations moving towards Republicans, finally this week, the New York Times wrote the story that I've been talking about on all my platforms for a long time. The data doesn't lie. In every state where there's data, because people register by party, the trend has been towards Republicans, including amongst younger voters and non-white voters. Here's the New York Times reporter who wrote the story. I won't say broke the story because the data's been out there, but here's a little video of the New York Times reporter explaining what they found when they looked at the data. This is S8, please.
If you want to assess the health of a major political party, take a look at the voter registration numbers. And for the Democratic Party, it's not looking good. We looked at 30 states in America and Washington, D.C. that allow voters to register with a political party. And in those 30 states, in the last 4 years, the Democratic Party lost ground to the Republicans in every single one. Fewer people are now registered with the Democratic Party than there were on Election Day 2020.
So, Senator, there's obviously a multi-dimensional thing here. There's messaging and brand image. There's also mechanics. If the DNC called you and said, Senator, we need your advice, how can the party stop losing voters like this, which is obviously a trend that is not sustainable if the party wants to win the White House back?
Well, I mean, to me, this is basic blocking and tackling that the party needs to be doing all around the country. The state parties need to be doing this, and even the county parties need to be doing this all over the country. And so they need to prioritize it. They need to make it a funding priority for the state parties and for the local parties to get out there and register people to vote. Get volunteer groups out there registering people to vote, have a broad strategy on getting people registered. I think one thing the Republicans understand very clearly is if they can shape the voter registration, then they can really shape how legislative bodies and all that look. And so it's really, really important to winning elections. And this is another thing that's frustrating for me is I love all my Democratic friends, believe me, I really do. But we as Democrats, we need to remember that what this is all about is winning elections. We need to be winning elections. And if whatever we're doing is leading toward victory in November, we need to stop doing it and focus on things that will win us elections. The truth is, Democratic Party's not out of ideas. They're not very good at articulating those ideas. Democratic Party's not out of great leadership. We have a lot of great leadership out there. We just need to get that leadership into the right offices, into the right places, with the right messages. And the truth is we're going to be okay, but there's a lot of work to be done on the Democratic side. And I know the National Party just went through a big chairman's race and all that. And I think all that dust is settled now and they're trying to get back to work. But in some ways we are behind, and we need a very committed program to getting people registered to vote and then to make sure they do vote. It turns out that the way it works in voting, Democrats tend to have a broader appeal, but a less intense appeal. So in other words, we may get a lot of younger voters that register, and that's great. It's really important that we get them to register, but we actually have to get them to vote. And so, this is part of a years-long problem for the Democratic Party, and it's something we certainly need to prioritize.
You talked about leadership. I did my reported monologue earlier about Gavin Newsom. Is there anybody or more than one person who's thinking of running for president 28 who you think would be good for the party to be the nominee?
I'm partial to Andy Beshear. And one reason I am is because he's from Kentucky. I'm from Arkansas. He's winning in a red state. He's won the Attorney General's office twice. He's run the governor's office twice. I don't know if Andy really wants to run for president, but he's the kind of guy we ought to look at who's able to pull it off like Bill Clinton did in 1992. Like what you said, Bill Clinton was able to navigate the pretty conservative waters of Arkansas and keep being elected and reelected. And we need to look for people that have appeal beyond just the blue states. And so I am partial to Andy Beshear.
Okay. How would you rate the performance of Ken Martin, the Democratic national chairman?
So far, so good. I don't follow him on a day-to-day basis, but I do know that they had a big conference here in Little Rock for like all the state presidents or state party chairs, whatever they had. I don't remember exactly which organization it was, but that they really are trying to emphasize state and local races, which is critical, which is very, very critical for the DNC. So I think he's on the right track. I think he's probably doing a good job. I really don't have any idea. I saw some funding numbers about how they're behind the Republicans, but that's not all that unusual. Again, they've been through a race, internal race. All that's kind of, the dust has settled now. Hopefully he's getting himself in gear, has his team around him, and they're really going to get some good stuff done.
Yeah, as you said, fundraising has been a big concern. They're way behind the RNC. And I think one of the biggest undercovered stories now is the possibility, I'm not predicting it, certainly not rooting it, I don't have a rooting interest, that J.D. Vance wins the Republican nomination with Donald Trump support easily. And all this money, which is available to the Republicans for super PAC, soft money, what some call dark money, from the crypto community, from Silicon Valley, which is now tilting for a lot of these people, Elon Musk and others, is going to go to Vance. Here's a Wall Street Journal story from this week, B2, please, that Musk, who had talked about starting a third party, now the Journal says is not a surprise, thinking of supporting his friend Vance. And he gave $300 million to support Republicans in the last cycle. I think there's going to be a bunch of billionaires, some from Silicon Valley who know Vance well and would love their pal to be president, who can write really big checks. And although Vance is mocked on social media by the left every day, I raise this question. George W. Bush in 98 ran for re-election in Texas. Democrats did nothing to slow him down. And he used that momentum to win the White House. You got Vance, chair of the RNC Finance Committee. No vice president's ever had that. Really boosted by the apparatus in Washington. Should Democrats be doing stuff now? And if so, what? To try to keep Vance from going into an election year with $2 billion in the bank and Democrats spending all their money fighting each other?
Yeah, this is a real great question. I mean, it's very perceptive, and you're connecting a lot of dots, which is very important. Also, in your question, what you're talking about, or what you're touching on, is what Graham Plattner is talking about in Maine, and that is billionaires are running this country. The reason they're able to run it is they're buying elections, or they're buying the political process. I mean, for someone to put 30 million or 300 million or whatever the number is ultimately going to be, I don't know what it's going to be. And then by the time you add it all up, it's billions and billions of dollars that are spent on these races. And then you have some, guy here on the street who wants to give somebody $500, and that's a lot of money to him in a political race. He just feels like his voice is just gone. And guess what? It is. And I hate that. Obviously I'm for campaign finance reform. I'm for all these things to try to make it better. I never have liked Citizens United, all those kind of things. But really, this is very troubling. And I'm not going to single out J.D. Vance as the bad guy here. He's just operating in the system that we have today. And I'm really, really concerned about it, that whoever it is, whether it's J.D. Vance or somebody, they have so much money going into the next presidential cycle that really nobody can touch them.
Yeah. So if all the candidates who were thinking of running in 28 got together and said, Senator Pryor, what can we do to slow down J.D. Vance so that we don't wake up in the spring of 2028 and he's got $2 billion in the bank and we've got no money left and we beat each other up? Is there a way to slow him down now?
I don't really think that there is, because the Supreme Court allows all this kind of stuff to happen. I mean, he can go out and he can accumulate this. And yes, it's true. It doesn't actually go into his campaign account, but it's all laying there for him. It's at his disposal to use to elect J.D. Vance as the next president. And I do think he's going to do that. Now, of course, some of that is the power of incumbency. When you are the sitting vice president, the heir apparent to the president, yes, the money comes in easier for you. But it's also partly about being a Republican, because they have a ton of huge donors on that side. They have so many people that can give $1 million or $5 million and not even really blink at it. And there's just not that many on the Democratic side. So they always tend to have a lot more money. We may have one or two big donors, but they have hundreds. And, the whole Koch network and all that stuff is just so huge on their side. So, yeah, it's not good for our country. And again, I'm not saying anything bad about J.D. Vance. I just mean the system right now is not working for people. And again, that goes back to the Democratic candidate in Maine. That's what he's talking about. And he's going to try to tap into that anxiety and even tap into that anger and try to, make that race in Maine a referendum on Donald Trump and the current system. We'll see what happens.
Two of the richest families in America from Arkansas, the Waltons and the Stevenses, right?
Yeah.
They give more to Republicans and Democrats.
Oh, yeah. And the Walton family is big now, and it's diffused because Sam Walton's been gone for a while, and you're down to the third generation, even fourth generation's emerging. And, they have a diversity of views on things. But traditionally, Sam Walton and the immediate family, they were always like Ronald Reagan Republican.
Yeah.
Chamber of Commerce, really.
There's some Democrats in the family now, as you said. Last on redistricting, this is about money. It's about the aggressiveness of the Trump team to try to keep control of the House. Should a normal person care about all these headlines about redistricting in Texas and California, or it's just process?
No, they absolutely should care, because it really goes to the core of, the Constitution. I mean, we have a right. Everybody talks about we have a right to vote and all that stuff. It's true. We also have a right to be represented. And the way that the courts allow both parties, but it's mostly on the Republican side, but anyway, both parties to redistrict and just out and out gerrymander for political reasons, it's just obscene. And the truth is, Mark, there's only 9 people in the country that can stop it. 9 people, and that's people in the Supreme Court. This is purely a Supreme Court question. And I would hope and pray that when some of this does make its way up to the court finally says enough is enough. You've got to put some sanity back in redistricting, and you've got to follow the principles that we've been laying out over the years. The problem is that the Supreme Court allows partisanship as a factor, and it is a factor. You got to be realistic about that. You allow that as a factor, but they've allowed all these people to elevate that one factor above everything else. And that's the problem. And if the Supreme Court would stop this, I think our democracy, I think our country, I think our people would be happier. I think the democracy would be more sound. I think our elected officials would have to work harder for our votes, because there wouldn't be nearly as many safe districts, and they'd have to get out there and really listen to the minority views in their community. So anyway, I really hope that the Supreme Court will finally put a stop to this.
All right. Former Arkansas Senator Mark Pryor, from Student Council President at Walt Whitman High School. Fight on for Whitman, the Vikings.
All right. You can sing the fight song on the way out. How does that sound?
To the family business, the United States Senator, and then back in Arkansas. Senator, really grateful to you for sharing your wisdom with us, and pleased to see how well you're doing. Thank you so much.
Great to be with you. Thank you so much. And thank everybody for listening. Thank you.
All right. Next up, my conversation with Michael Caputo had the unfortunate experience of fighting both cancer and being canceled simultaneously. His story and how he's come through it, that's next up. Here's a question for you. You got to think about this. Is the continued divide between the Trump administration and the Federal Reserve putting us all potentially behind the curve again? Can the Fed take the right action at the right time? Or are we all going to be looking at a potential economic slowdown? And what would that mean for your savings? Consider then diversifying with gold through the folks at Birch Gold Group. For decades now, gold has been viewed as a safe haven whenever there's economic stagnation, global uncertainty, or high inflation. Birch Gold makes it incredibly easy for you to diversify some of your savings right into gold. If you've got an IRA or an old 401k, you can convert that into a tax-sheltered IRA in physical gold. Another option, buy some gold to keep in your safe. But first, before you make that choice, get some education. Birch Gold will send you a free info kit about gold. Just text the word NEXT to the number 989898. Again, text the word NEXT to 989898. Consider diversifying a portion of your savings into gold. That way, if the Federal Reserve can't stay ahead of the curve for the country, at least you can stay ahead of the curve for yourself. Next up, a great American story and a great American. Michael Caputo is someone I've known for a long time, and he's got a great American story. He's got a wonderful family. He has had extraordinary professional success, and he's also done something that many people are called on to do, but not as many do it as elegantly as Michael has. He's taken his personal and professional challenges, and he's fused them together and into an opportunity to help not just himself, but the country. Michael has been a long time operative in the Republican Party as well as in policy, cares about his party and about the country, worked with President Trump and a lot of people in MAGA, but long before Donald Trump was in the political scene, Michael was. He's also dealt with an extraordinary health challenge during a difficult time for him. And Michael Caputo joins us now to talk about it all. Michael, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Mark. It's great to be with you.
Talk first, just to give people who don't know you, about your political resume. How did you start in politics? What have you done in politics and in government over the course of your career?
Well, I started in the United States Army. I kind of grew up in a rural, sometimes trailer park environment, and Army was something we had to do to be able to go to college. And after I left the infantry and went into the university, I interned with Congressman Jack Kemp, who was my congressman as well as my quarterback for the Buffalo Bills. I grew up in Buffalo, and that I just took off from there. I went to work for the Reagan in '84 on the campaign, just as a kind of guy on the ground, opening chairs up. I went on to work in Jack Kemp's presidential campaign in '88. Went into George H.W. Bush's campaign in '92. By then, I had started specializing in media relations. When we lost in '92 to Bill Clinton, I took an assignment, a USAID assignment in Russia, where I was in charge of the formation of the new democratic election system in Russia, and worked there probably for nigh on 7 years. Came back from Russia and got back into just opening my own PR firm. I was involved in the private sector. And then along came Donald Trump. I knew Donald Trump for many years. At the 1988 Republican convention in New Orleans, I was a driver in the motor pool, and I was assigned to a visitor named Donald Trump. And I drove him around for a couple of days while he was there and just stayed in touch with him. When he was thinking about running for governor in New York in 2013, 2014, I ran that operation. When he wanted to buy the Buffalo Bills, my hometown team, I was helping him out with that. And then, of course, I joined the 2016 campaign, worked at the convention, and then stayed out of the administration, ran my own PR firm still. But then when the nation was struck by COVID, the president asked me to come and be Assistant Secretary of Public Affairs at HHS. As you remember, comms were a mess. And I was trying to handle that very highly stressful environment. But I think I should step back for a second and remind folks that because the Clinton administration sent me to Russia to meddle in their elections, I became very sexy to Robert Mueller. because I think I might have been at the time the only person before Robert Witkoff to know both Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. Putin was just a deputy mayor of St. Petersburg when I met him, not a nice guy. And so I went on to, after going through Russiagate, they took everything, all of our savings, or, what do you call it, legal fees. I was working in the HHS operation, such stressful stuff. I felt
how much before we'll do the cancer in a sec. How much did you spend in legal fees?
About $500,000.
Yeah. So you and your family, you, again, as you said, early associated with President Trump, knew him, and then came into the government and had to deal with being investigated. Were you ever charged with anything?
Oh no. But it's a long story, but it never stopped. I mean, they're still doing it now.
Yeah.
The fact is, if you're a friend of Donald Trump, you're vulnerable.
Yeah. So you've dealt with cancellation. You've dealt with dealing in the Department of Health and Human Services during COVID. And then in the midst of dealing with those things and the aftermath of those things, tell us your cancer story.
Well, since I had to coordinate all the communications, it meant I had to coordinate all the doctors, Anthony Fauci, Robert Redfield, all the doctors who were on TV, because nobody wanted to hear from Michael Caputo, who had no idea about medicine and science. They wanted to hear from the doctors. I was very busy making sure they could communicate. And so I had them come to my office quite often to discuss the schedule for the next day. One day, Robert Redfield of the CDC, he was sitting next to me, and I turned my head. I was 300 pounds, 100 pounds more heavy than I am now. And I turned my head, and he poked me in the neck, and he said, "Michael, what's that?" I had the turtleneck of fat, and my lymph node was poking out hard as a rock. And he said, "Michael, you got to go to the hospital right now." So they threw me in a car. I went to the NIH, where I was met by the Surgeon in Chief of the United States and the head of the National Cancer Institute. They had gotten a call from somebody in the White House saying, "My guy's coming. You better figure out what's going on." And 3 hours later, they had removed my lymph node. And I left that night and went back to my apartment. As I left, because my family was back in Buffalo, I was working in, the quarantine section of Washington. Remember how that was. And so when I left, I said goodbye to the doctors, and I said, I guess I'll hear from you in a week or so. They said, "No, we're not allowed to go home until we know the answer." And they called me after later that night and told me I had head and neck cancer, and that it had likely gone to my brain. And the entire world crashed around me. You can imagine.
Yeah.
I didn't handle it well. I blame the world for it. It's a stress-driven cancer, and I blamed everyone but myself for the stress. Yeah. And then I went into quarantine from my family. My daughters would sit outside my bedroom with their backs to the door and read to me. And after they went to bed, I would open the door, and there would be their artwork. They were 5 and 7, and it really became so bad. It wasn't just the cancer, because head and neck cancer was throat cancer. It's one of the easiest to cure, but it's one of the most difficult to treat, because it's the intersection of your breath and your swallow and your voice, and the treatments are quite brutal. It's chemotherapy and 35 doses of radiation to your head, one every day.
The stories, you and I were in touch during that period where you were isolated from your girls while you were dealing with this, and this heartbreaking moments, and the difficulties. You said it's not the most dangerous cancer, but it's tough to deal with. Talk about how you came through it.
Well, at one point, because the media was not being kind to me, they weren't being kind to anyone around Trump. And when I fell ill, they were just brutalizing me. New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Politico, terrible people. Terrible stories. And, one day I talked to the president. He said, "Just stop reading this stuff. Stop answering emails. Stop attending meetings." Because I was still assistant secretary. He says, you better take care of yourself. So I stopped paying attention. But it was brutal. And right before Thanksgiving 2020, I decided to die. I decided to let it take me. I stopped eating and drinking. Nobody knew, because I was quarantined. And then my wife figured it out, And she grabbed me up and tipped me to the hospital, a great hospital in Buffalo that was treating me. And Roswell Park, by the way, a leading cancer hospital, luckily in Buffalo. And I went in there, and the nurses later told me that I was trying to die. It was very clear I hadn't had water or food for days.
How many days,
and
Michael?
Of course, about 4. And it isn't a lot for a lot of people, but it was a lot for a person falling fast.
Yeah.
And the nurses said, one nurse, she was so kind. She said, "You're trying to die." But you can't die when they're feeding you through your arm, you know? And so I was recovering. I came out of there after a very, very profound experience, deciding that I was going to live, right? And that was Thanksgiving 20. At the end of February, the doctors called me in, and they said, "Michael, we expected to have some kind of news that we had a next step in your treatment, but we can't find cancer anywhere in your body." And you know, when you have cancer of the throat and it gets into your lymph node, you have to assume it's 4 inches from your brain. The lymphatic fluid has taken it to your brain fairly quickly. And in fact, by the way, they don't, when it's in your lymph node, they don't take it out, because you can poke it and then it's in your lymphatic fluid. It goes through your whole body. I have a PR person's understanding of this, but because I found out later, they were amazed that it didn't go to my brain.
Yeah.
And
Go ahead.
Because the president sent me to the NIH, and the surgeon in chief of the United States was doing my surgery, and the number 2 on the surgery was the head of the National Cancer Institute. I was like I was a sultan, you know. Yeah. And here I had come from a trailer park, and but they don't take out your lymph node, because it could go, if they make a mistake, you're done. But he knew how to do it, this fellow, and he took it out. And the folks at Roswell told me the reason why it didn't go to my brain is because immediately they took out the lymph node. That's the only reason I'm alive today.
So through a combination of great care and luck and good fortune and Lord, you're cancer-free now, right?
I am complete. I got throat cancer is a little different. They say no evidence of disease. You know, people who have terrible lung and other cancers, they call it remission, because they kind of expect it to come back. It's a little different in throat cancer. And so I'm disease-free. And I have been since February of 21. It shocked me.
Yeah. And you sound and look great. And you've had the good fortune of spending time with some of the people in our country now who, as part of President Trump's MAHA movement, are really focused on cancer and beating cancer. Yeah. And that includes the Secretary Kennedy, includes Dr. Oz. So talk about your vision for the MAHA movement as it pertains to cancer.
Well, you can imagine, as a lifelong Republican and many years of support for Donald Trump, I did not want to like Robert Kennedy. He had said some mean things, but after he endorsed, one of the leaders of the campaign said to me, "Well, why don't you go and help him? He wants to be involved in the health department. Maybe he wants to be HHS secretary. You're the only one." I was one of the guys on the policy group, and I was doing health policy. They said, "Go and talk to him. You've been to HHS. You can tell him about, maybe he wants to start like an Operation Warp Speed. Maybe he wants to be secretary. Maybe he wants to be an assistant to the president." He didn't know. And so I actually moved in with Bobby Kennedy and his wife, Cheryl. They had rented Dr. Oz's house in Palm Beach to be close to Mar-a-Lago and go to meetings. And I moved in with them for several days. It was a profound experience for me, because I went in there thinking, boy, I'm not going to like this guy. And within a day, I understood that he was someone to really be admired. The Bobby Kennedy is unique in Washington, and that makes it difficult for Bobby. I discovered one of the things that made me like him is he's physically unable to lie. And honestly, we were talking about things where I was saying, well, I'll say it this way. He says, "Michael, I can't do that. I don't lie." Yeah. And that's a wonderful thing for America, but it's terrible for Bobby Kennedy.
There's an innocence about him, a sense of wonder about the world that, as you said, keeps him from feeling he can lie. And as you also said, makes him a PR handler's nightmare.
It is, but at the same time, he had conversations with me about, and he ended up landing on HHS secretary, But he's like, how do I impact children? He says the chronic disease problem for the children in America is he says it keeps him up at night. And he wakes up every morning praying that he can do something. And I realized he wasn't lying to me. And so we talked about it. And it's interesting because, Dr. Oz has a house on the beach there in Palm Beach, like 10 bedrooms, 13 bathrooms. And it was like, I don't know, what do you call it? Big Brother, that TV show? Because all of Bobby's people are there, a bunch of doctors, they each have a bedroom. It's like Big Brother with hippies, And it was just a really wonderful experience. And I was allergic to chemo. It was a terrible experience. I went into it blew out my hearing. I have what some doctors tell me is a 9 or a 10 out of 10 tinnitus. It changes your life completely. Yeah. But one thing it does is it doesn't let you sleep. And so I wake up every day at 4 a.m. I've adjusted my life to deal with that. But one of the things I had to do on Palm Beach was get up and go downstairs because I'm not going to lay in bed and stare at the ceiling. So I'm in Bobby's rental house. I'm down at the table looking out at the ocean, having a coffee by myself before sunrise. And the next person to get up, of course, is Bobby, because he's an early riser. And we would talk for a little while. But each of the doctors and the hippies would get up and come down, and I'd be at the table like I've been there all night. And one day, one of the guys said to me, he got up. He wasn't one of the early risers. and he came down clearly. He had gotten up to talk to me. He said, Michael, what is wrong? I said, what do you mean? He says, you're yellow. He's like, there's something wrong. What is wrong? Well, for 7 months, I was pretty sure my cancer was back. I had believed that somehow or another, because of my Google, medical degree, I believed that my throat cancer had gone to my prostate, and it had turned, it was going bad. And I didn't want to go through cancer treatments again, so I didn't tell anyone. And I was just feeling worse and worse. And before I went to Bobby's house, my wife pulled me aside and she said, what is wrong with you? You're falling apart. And I told her, I said, I think my cancer is back. She said, well, what are you doing? What do you do? I mean, have you seen a doctor? I said, no, I don't want to. And she said, do something for me. So she had me sign up for this website where you pay a bunch of money and they do 100 different blood tests on you. They actually take like a gallon, I signed up for it, and then I got in the car and I went to Bobby's house. And then 4 days later, this fellow wakes up and comes down to the table. He says, what's wrong with you? And is a doctor. And I said, I think my cancer is back. And he said, what are you doing about it? And I said, nothing. I just really want it to take me. I can't do it again. And he said, don't do that. He said, do something. What are you doing? I said, did you tell your wife? I said, I told her, Sunday. And he said, what did you do? And I said, I signed up for this website, right? And Mark, it's funny. He looked at me and said, what's the name of the website? I said, functionhealth.com. And he said, that's my website. It was Dr. Mark Hyman. Yeah. And Dr. Hyman said, did you take your blood test yet? I said, no. He said, stand by. And he texted somebody. And I got my blood test that day in Palm Beach.
And what was the diagnosis?
Well, I'll tell you. I went home because Bobby was later that day picked for HHS, and I said goodbye so he could celebrate with his people. And I went home, and Mark called me 3-4 days later. No, a couple days later. And he said, Michael, I didn't give you a cancer panel, but it looks to me like you got a kidney stone the size of Jupiter. He said, because I don't know, blood in my urine or whatever, the way and he said, got to get a scan. He hooked me up with a scan. Sure enough, I had a nearly 2-centimeter kidney stone. And it was stuck in my kidney. And if I had sat there with my Google MD and thought it was cancer, I might have had a failed kidney and really had a problem. I had surgery during the inauguration, and I'm fine. It wasn't cancer, Mark. It was a kidney stone,
which is about the most painful thing out there. Having had one, I can say, in your sense, bigger than mine was. Tell us about your vision now for MAHA and for cancer. What are they doing? What should they be doing? How much hope should people have about this administration's ability, not just for kids, but for everybody fighting cancer?
Yeah, hope is the key, right? Because what happened to me is I lost it. I went through, and I would go every day waiting in the waiting room to go get my head blasted with radiation. And there were these 3 children there that were there every day. When I went there, they were there, and they were sitting in chairs with me. 3-4 days later, they were in gurneys. A week after that, they were unresponsive to me. And when I said hello, because I remember their names.
Yeah.
And then they didn't show up again. And I knew they had died. And I thought to myself, after my hearing on my allergy to chemo, I thought, first of all, these children should not be getting cancer. They're too darn young. And by the way, what if they're allergic to chemo? The toxins they put in your body to heal you, I have to deal with this for 20 years. They'd have to deal with it for 70. It's unbearable. These poor kids. And Bobby got me focused on childhood cancer. And I believe the administration through MAHA is absolutely focused on this troubling trend that cancer is increasingly striking younger and younger people. And Bobby and the president are completely focused on young people in this first stage of MAHA. They're attacking childhood chronic disease, and cancer is the #1 chronic disease killer of children. These early onset cancers are growing at a rate that is frightening doctors. And it's growing at a rate that's incomparable to any other nation in the world. So what I believe, because you can imagine I talk to people in the administration, and I'm very interested in this because I believe MAHA cancer can change everything. Chemotherapy, the chemo that they gave to me hasn't been really changed since 1890. You believe that? 1890. Yeah. And they're treating children with ancient medicines when there are other ways to treat them. We need to discover them. But more importantly, you see the president and his team very focused on artificial intelligence. And there's a reason for this in the health industry, in public health. And in childhood cancer, you can use AI to, number one, using the data we have buckets and buckets of data over history, and you can put it into AI, and within half an hour, you can have answers to what is causing some of this. And you can work with children who have the disease to figure out the environmental factors. Maybe it's pesticides, maybe it's food, as what's driving this cancer. With artificial intelligence and pushing diagnosis and research into younger ages, we have a spike in cancer in 20 and 30-year-olds. We know that a lot of that came from their childhood. And also, we don't discover it because, Mark, nobody even asks you about cancer at the doctor until you're 40. Right? It made to make it younger. I believe that the president and Bobby Kennedy are completely focused on this. And by the way, Jay Bhattacharya, an incredible, incredible doctor. And I've talked to these fellows. They all agree that the causes of cancer in childhood are poorly understood. And there is absolutely something we can do about it. I'm talking because, after I got healed by I was cured by Roswell Park, and I went to Moffitt in Tampa to be healed. And then I went everywhere in the nation trying to find an answer to my tinnitus. So I've talked to everyone. Yeah. And there are places like City of Hope that are actually pretty far along. The City of Hope in LA, they're actually very far along in applying artificial intelligence in diagnosis and research. And, we're going to be able to find the environmental causes of cancer in children. Artificial intelligence will break this whole logjam for us.
Michael, finally, tell folks who will say, well, Michael Caputo was dealt with crushing medical news and gave up. Tell folks what they should take from your lesson about whether if they've got a cancer diagnosis or some other really tough diagnosis, how they should react to it.
I have to tell you, if you're not a person of faith, then lean into your family. I tell my friends, I prayed for boys. I got none. I have all daughters. And girls take care of their dads, right? But in addition to that, and I don't really want to be preachy about it, but I was shocked by the no evidence of disease diagnosis. I lived across the street from my parish, and I could not, my Catholic parish, I could not go to church. The Catholic priest would send the host over to me for Eucharist during the day, and I cured myself with God. But I can tell you, my recovery, I was in a bad situation. Antifa was outside my house. They were throwing things at my windows at night to try and keep me awake as I was in recovery. And so my wife and I and my children, we moved to Florida because I wanted to go to church and I couldn't, right? And we moved to a little town called Ave Maria. It's in the Everglades in Florida, where the founder of Domino's had built a beautiful cathedral, and now there's 11,000 Catholics here. And so I showed up, and I really didn't get out of bed here for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then when I did, I realized that going to Mass wasn't enough. I'm actually in a master's program for theology at Ave Maria University. I know people think that's shocking considering what a smash mouth politician I've been. Really, in the end, there is only one way to be healed, and it's your faith. It really is. And your family can get you there. But I gave up. I really did. But I was saved.
Yeah. Michael has not talked much about this, and we've just scratched the surface, but it's a great American story. Every cancer struggle is in some ways the same, but everyone's different. And very few people have to fight for their lives and deal with cancer while they're also being investigated by a special counsel and dealing with attempts to cancel. So, Michael, it's a great story and a brave story, and it's testament not to the support of your family, but also to your extraordinary struggle and determination. And I couldn't be happier to see you looking so great.
Content. I want to thank you for all the cancer content that you put out there. You didn't have to do that. I can tell you, a lot of us with cancer and post-cancer are watching.
Appreciate it. That's a show I do called Cancer Decoded with Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong, who owns the Los Angeles Times and is one of the most renowned cancer experts in the country. And I'm just so honored to be partnered with him on that program and have learned so much about struggles like yours. And as I said, all the struggles, all the challenges are the same in some ways, but everyone's unique, and yours is a pretty special story. And Michael, we're so grateful to you for sharing it.
Thank you, Mark.
That is it for today's episode. Grateful to you for watching. Make sure you subscribe and download Next Up wherever you get your podcasts. It's on YouTube and pretty much everywhere else. Grateful to you for being a Nexter. Please keep watching so you always know what's coming next up.